for the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
To lay out the amendment, sorry.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, members, this is a redistricting amendment, and the amendment would require essentially that any redistricting bill which redraws the lines of legislative, congressional, state board of education, or court of appeals district must include in its bill analysis information that is designed to assess how groups that are protected under the Voting Rights Act are impacted by these proposed new maps. This includes all racial groups, as well as particular language minority groups in certain parts of the state. Unfortunately, Texas has had a long history of Voting Rights Act violations. In fact, there was a conservative Fifth Circuit judge that said it's notable as well that in every redistricting cycle since 1970, Texas has been found to violate the Voting Rights Act with racially gerrymandered districts. And prior to 1970, as y'all recall, in the height of the civil rights movement, you can imagine what the maps were like prior to the Voting Rights Act being signed. Last decade, the state was found to have first violated the United States Constitution in 2011, and then again in 2013 when it redrew House District 90. And what this comes down to is a pre-clearance provision that we previously had in the Voting Rights Act of Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act. It required that the state would demonstrate to the Department of Justice that the proposed maps did not have a discriminatory impact. And as we saw during the last during the last redistricting cycle, we saw the impact of the maps on historically disenfranchised groups. And here's what we saw in the absence of pre-clearance during the special session. 95% of the growth, the population growth in Texas came from communities of color. Approximately half of that growth came from the Latino community. And despite the fact that Texas would not have gained 2 new congressional seats, we could have even potentially lost some. Both of the newly drawn congressional seats were Anglo-majority districts with Anglo-majority eligible voter populations. During the redistricting process, there was a mere 24 hours notice before the redistricting committee heard congressional maps. And so this amendment would ensure that the redistricting bills cannot just pass through, that we have really significant and important racial voting analysis. And here's the impact of the Texas House maps on the Latino population in Texas. For the Texas House, we saw a map that eliminated 3 majority Latino eligible voting districts. It also eliminated 6 districts that had a majority Spanish surname voter registration. And if you think about that, the impact on the Latino population in Texas, this is why we need the amendment. We need to be able to see the data and see what the impact is going to be on our community. And during the special session, despite the fact that the Mexican American Legislative Caucus, a Texas Legislative Black Caucus, both requested to invite experts to come testify before the committee and explain to us about the impact of the maps and the proposed district maps and whether the maps would comply with the Voting Rights Act, they were not allowed. So this amendment is so crucial for us to determine compliance of new maps, to determine compliance with the Voting Rights Act. And there's a wide variety of data, but we would respectfully request your support for the amendment, and I move adoption.
The chair recognizes Mr. Hunter in opposition to the amendment.
Respect to my colleagues, this is a redistricting amendment that involves legal. I would request no vote.
The chair recognizes Ms. Niave Criado to close on the amendment.
Move adoption.
The question occurs on adoption of the amendment. A record vote has been requested by Mr. Slayton. A record vote has been granted. The clerk will ring the bell. Shows Ms. Niave Criado voting aye. Show Ms. Morales voting aye. Mr. Reynolds voting aye. Mr. Hunter voting nay. All members voted. There being 64 ayes and 84 nays, the amendment fails to adopt. The following amendment